Years and years of playing games has conditioned us to look at any enemy or antagonist character in a game as a potential boss fight, because that's what games do, right? They introduce these formidable foes or ghastly creatures and eventually let you take them on in dramatic duels. Well, not always. There have been more than a few instances of games introducing characters that you think are going to be centerpieces of such encounters, but never really get their own boss fights. This is a feature about a few such characters. Warning: there are spoilers ahead for every game and series mentioned in this feature. Before we go ahead, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos every single day, and your support really helps us out. With that out of the way, let's start. Harbinger, Mass Effect series. The Harbinger was built up over the course of 2 full games as the leader of a terrifying synthetic alien race that was hell-bent on wiping out almost all intelligent, sentient life in the galaxy. But King Reaper never really made it into his own boss fight. The final minutes of Mass Effect 3 strongly suggested that that would indeed be the case, and honestly, after how well the series had built him up as the ultimate big bad, taking him on in a climactic confrontation felt like a no-brainer. Well, not for BioWare apparently. Not only does Mass Effect 3 not feature the Harbinger as a final boss, it has no final boss. The Illusive Man, Mass Effect series. Here's yet another amazing Mass Effect villain, probably the most amazing Mass Effect villain. Cerberus head honcho Illusive Man went from teetering on the edge of villainy in Mass Effect 2 to becoming an out-and-out bad guy in Mass Effect 3. But the fact that you never actually got to fight him was a major disappointment. And it's not like the game didn't have the chance to let players do just that. Shepard does confront the Illusive Man face-to-face in Mass Effect 3's finale in a moment that would have been perfect for a boss fight, calling back to his encounter with Saren at the end of Mass Effect 1. The fact that that didn't end up happening will always sting. Skullface, Metal Gear Solid 5. Metal Gear Solid is a series that has built its reputation on excellent boss fights, among other things. But as it did with so many other things, the Phantom Pain defied conventions, but not exactly in the best way possible. The almost total lack of good boss fights in MGS5 was a major disappointment as it was, but to not even have a climactic duel against the game's main bad guy, well, that was a tough pill to swallow for many fans. Skullface was a formidable foe throughout much of the Phantom Pain, and not being able to take him on as a traditional boss was a huge injustice to his character. FRAU ENGEL, Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus. FRAU ENGEL, introduced in the New Order, took over for Wilhelm Death's Head Strass as the main antagonist in its sequel, Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus, and she was absolutely deplorable. She was the perfect villain, unhinged, cruel, intelligent, powerful. Her presence was felt throughout every minute of the game, and the story was so much better for it. Which was why it was such a major disappointment that the New Colossus never actually gave you the chance to face her down in a traditional, dramatic duel. Her death scene was cool enough, but would have been so much better if it had been preceded by a boss fight. Alligator, Resident Evil 2 Remake. The Resident Evil 2 remake in 2019 changed plenty of things from the original game, and sadly, the boss fight against the giant, mutated, zombified alligator in the sewers of Raccoon City was one of the things that got changed for the worse. Leon does still encounter this monstrosity, and there is still a set-piece moment dedicated to it, but that's really all it is. The boss fight against the alligator in the original RE2 wasn't all that special either, honestly, but a remake was the perfect chance to give it the treatment that it deserved. That didn't happen is one of the few ways RE2's remake fell short of expectations. 343 Guilty Spark, Halo 3. Okay, technically, on paper, you do take on 343 Guilty Spark in a boss fight in Halo 3, but as anyone who's played the game will tell you, it's not really much of a boss fight. There's little to no challenge, it doesn't feel all that dramatic, and it's just such a letdown after the little metallic ball's heinous betrayal. You expect 343 to be the centerpiece of this major boss fight, but what actually happens is that he goes down like an absolute chump. Richard, the Medium. True to Bloober Team's track record, the Medium is a game with almost zero combat, which is something that really does the game no favors. Why? Well, because there are more than a few enemies in the game who have absolutely excellent visual designs. Designs that scream boss fight, but are relegated to simple cutscenes. Take Richard, for example. His horrifying, tentacled form in the spirit world would have made for such a cool boss encounter, and players would no doubt have loved taking him down given the horrible acts that he committed when he was still alive. but his encounter with Marianne and his eventual death are both limited to a single cutscene. What a letdown. G-Man, Half-Life series. Oh, G-Man, what would Half-Life be without you? Not half as interesting, we can say that for sure. The G-Man's presence looms large over everyone and everything in Half-Life, and he's always lurking in the shadows, plotting out whatever it is he's working toward and prepping to pull strings that most people can't even see. He's one of the best villains we've ever seen in a game, so it makes sense that we're desperate to take him on in battle. That hasn't happened yet, but maybe, hopefully, it will at some point in the future. REYNA, Gears 5. Gears 5 delivers a solid, surprising ending, doing things that have been unprecedented for the series in the past, but it does stumble in some ways. That you never get to take on Queen Reyna in a one-on-one duel is a bit of a disappointment. Thankfully, in this case at least, there's little doubt in our minds that we will eventually get the Reyna boss fight that we've been waiting for. Gears 5 makes it abundantly clear that she'll be back, and when she does return, hopefully not long from now, she's probably going to have her own boss fight. Or we hope so, at least. HOJO, Final Fantasy VII Remake. When a game has an evil and corrupt corporation taking center stage, and HOJO still ends up coming across as easily the most hateable character in the story, you know there has to be something really wrong with HOJO. The scientific mastermind responsible for so much that's gone wrong in the game, and devoid of any remorse or regret whatsoever, HOJO is an excellent villain that deserved to be a boss fight. Sure, the HOJO boss fight in the original FF7 doesn't come until much later, but that's true of Sephiroth as well, and we got to fight him in this remake. Hraesvelgr, God of War. God of War is an excellent game, but it's not a perfect game, with disappointing boss fights, mostly because of quantity, not quality, being one of its biggest issues. One boss encounter that the game hints at is with Hraesvelgr, the giant bird that's seen off in the distance in Helheim, who would have made for a perfect God of War boss fight. And interestingly enough, the Jotun was originally going to be a boss fight, but got cut out and relegated to being set dressing during development. Who knows, maybe we'll get to fight him in one of the sequels, but right now, all we can do is stare at him wistfully and fantasize about tearing his wings off of his body and then beating him with them. Celebrimbor, Middle-earth Shadow of War. Celebrimbor is never quite portrayed as a good guy in Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War, as motivations are always shady and impure. Towards the end of Shadow of War, in fact, he's quite blatantly not a positive character. When you're first playing through the game, it feels like it's building up to a mano-a-mano duel between Talion and Celebrimbor, which, of course, is not the case. Well, it is the case in the fact that the game does seem to be building up to that, but there's no payoff for that build-up, which is more than a little frustrating. Catwoman, Batman Arkham City. There was no shortage of excellent boss fights in Batman Arkham City, but we're a greedy bunch, so why not ask for more? Catwoman is one of the best, most interesting characters in the Batman universe, as she is in the Arkham games. And though she is, in typical fashion, never really an out-and-out villain, she does still lock horns with Batman every now and then. In spite of that, she's never really given her own boss fight in the game. From a narrative perspective, honestly, that makes sense, but we still would have liked to see her grab the spotlight in a boss encounter all of her own. The Red and Blue Dragons, Demon Souls. How can two massive dragons in a Souls game that are hell-bent on killing everything that moves not be bosses? Well, it's not impossible, clearly. In a game that is all about boss fights, these two terrifying nuisances are little more than gimmicky roadblocks that you have to get past. You can still kill them, sure, but they're not actually bosses. Taking them down in traditional, well-designed boss fights would have been the dream scenario, as any Souls player would tell you. And the fact that neither the original game nor the remake sees the logic in that is a bit frustrating. Decoy Octopus, Metal Gear Solid. Solid Snake goes up against pretty much every member of Foxhound during his time in Metal Gear Solid 1, leading to some of the best designed boss fights you'll ever see in a game. All except Decoy Octopus, whose importance doesn't permeate the gameplay as much as it does the story. He appears on screen and dies all too quickly, and when he does, you don't even know he's Decoy Octopus. Perhaps it makes sense, given that context, that there's no Decoy Octopus boss fight, but we sure would have loved to see him in all his glory. So, what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you liked this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.